New at 10, a Missouri City family is pleading for justice for Jameka Williams. The mother of 4 was killed Friday night in front of her children.
On the night of November 10th, 2023, Jatira Williams was enjoying the cool of the evening when a call suddenly came to her phone. At first, she was shocked at who would be calling at such a late hour, but relief swept over her when she saw the caller's name. It was her niece. This relief quickly turned back into tension as she wondered what could have prompted the sudden call in the middle of the night. Determined to get answers to the countless questions racing through her mind, she picked up the call, and the heart-stopping words from the voice on the other end were, "Daddy just killed my mama."
I had got a call from my niece, and my niece was just crying, and she was like, "My daddy just killed my mama."
This is the case of Jameka Williams.
Gunned down in front of her own children. Police say she was shot by her on and off again boyfriend, who was also the father of 2 of her kids.
Before we begin, we would love to extend our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Jameka Williams and everyone affected by the crime on that fateful day. This case takes us all the way to Texas. Texas, the second largest state in the U.S., is known for its diverse geography, large cities like Houston, Dallas, and Austin, and its significant cultural and economic influence. It has a varied climate, ranging from arid in the west to humid in the east, and is home to a significant portion of the country's oil and gas production. In terms of crime, Texas has had higher crime rates compared to many other states, with significant concerns around violent crime and property crime. Large urban areas often experience higher crime rates, though trends can vary widely across different regions. In this same city, the news of the gruesome murder of Jameka Williams swept through every nook and cranny. In order to accurately comprehend this murder case, you need to first understand how she got here in the first place. Jameka Williams, known by those very close to her as New, was born on December 10th, 1984 in Houston, Texas. She was deeply cherished by her parents, Jimmy and Angela Steptoe Williams, who, along with the rest of her family, provided a strong foundation of love and support. From an early age, Jameka showed a deep sense of responsibility, and this only strengthened as she grew into adulthood, especially when she became a mother to 4 children. Jameka graduated from Alfonso Crutch High School in 2003 and later attended Texas Southern University, where she studied education. She was known for her lively personality and her caring nature, which she brought into every aspect of her life, both personally and professionally. Jameka worked as a quality assurance manager at Cigna Healthcare, where she demonstrated the same commitment and dedication she showed to her family. Her siblings, Tasha and Anthony, were especially close to Jameka, always offering emotional support, particularly during the challenges she faced in her on and off relationship with her estranged boyfriend, Christopher Lee Levels. Tasha and Anthony were fiercely protective of their sister, especially when Levels' jealousy and verbal threats became a concern. Jameka's children, Jaden, Amariah, Cambria, and Kaylee, were the center of her world. She was a devoted mother, always ensuring her children's needs were met and that they were surrounded by love. Despite the difficulties in her relationship with Levels, Jameka's focus remained on her children's well-being, and her siblings were always by her side, sharing in her commitment to family. However, Levels didn't share common goals with her, as he was a constant thorn in her flesh and her family's. He constantly got in fights with her, and the pair's relationship was marred with breakups and comebacks. He even sometimes took money from her family members and refused to pay back. However, among these breakups, comebacks, and constant debts, one thing stood tall. Levels constantly threatened Jameka.
Jamil, did you guys see any of the signs that this could happen?
I knew this guy wasn't right, and I knew he didn't belong with my sister. It just, I hate that this had to happen or whatever, but I've been seeing snakish ways in this guy's, like times where I didn't came to my sister's house before, and this guy walk in the house with only food for himself, no food for the kids, no food for my sister. And right then and there, I knew how selfish he was, because how can you come home without food for your family and you're the man of the house? You only come home with food for yourself. And right then and there, I knew he wasn't right for my sister.
These threats included threats of physical abuse, threats to life, and so on. However, Jameka and her family never took these threats to book, as they felt they were born out of rage or mere anger, because if we're being honest, he never for once really hit her. This was a decision they were about to regret. On the evening of November 10th, 2023, Jameka Williams was at her home in Missouri City, Texas, getting ready for a night out with friends. Mind you, this night out was part of her means of moving on from the toxicity posed by Levels and beginning something new with someone who shared similar dreams. She stood in front of a mirror, flat ironing her hair. She was filled with excitement and anticipation for the evening ahead. However, the atmosphere shifted when her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Christopher Lee Levels, arrived at the house. In addition to being a threat master, Levels had a history of jealousy and controlling behavior, and that night was no exception. He watched how happy Jameka was to be going out on this date, and he probably couldn't deal with the fact that Jameka would actually move on from him, and that someone else would make her that happy. So, in a fit of rage, he confronted her and used these exact words: "You're not going anywhere. Today is the day." This declaration signaled a dramatic turn in what had been an ordinary evening. In a moment of unthinkable violence, Levels pulled out a gun and shot Jameka in the face. The sound of the gunshot echoed through their home. 3 of their children, ages 14, 12, and 7, were present during this horrific act. They were left in shock and confusion as they witnessed their mother being attacked. After shooting Jameka, Levels looked back at her in disbelief as if he couldn't comprehend the gravity of his actions. He said, "What did I just do? I actually shot her." He then fled the scene in Jameka's car, leaving behind a scene of chaos and devastation. In the midst of overwhelming grief, one of the children managed to call Jameka's sister, their voice trembling with shock as they cried, "My daddy just killed my mama." Jatera Williams, Jameka's sister, rushed to the scene, hoping against hope that what she had heard wasn't true. But upon arrival, her worst fears were confirmed. Emergency responders were already there following someone's call, but despite their efforts, Jameka had succumbed to her injuries. She was pronounced dead at the scene. For the children, witnessing the horrific act had shattered their world. The eldest, just 14, stood frozen in disbelief, her mind struggling to process what had just unfolded. The tragic of that night would leave an indelible scar on their lives, haunting them for years to come. Family members, while aware of verbal threats made by Jameka's husband, Christopher Lee Levels, had never anticipated that it would escalate to such tragic violence. You see, when the first responders showed up, it wasn't just a crime scene. It was a moment heavy with something they couldn't shake. They'd seen a lot, but when it's kids left behind, it's different. It hits deeper. The family, they were huddled together, holding onto each other, trying to make sense of something that would never make sense again. Jameka was gone, and that's a truth they'd have to carry, like a weight they didn't ask for.
But family members of the victim tell me that he has threatened her before, but they say they never took the threat seriously because he was really part of their family and they have children together.
Word of Jameka's death spread fast. Her sister Jatera heard it from her niece, a call full of panic and fear. Without thinking, she rushed over, her heart pounding like she already knew what she'd find. When she got there, she couldn't believe her eyes. Police tape everywhere. Neighbors standing around, all quiet like the whole world had stopped for a second. Pushing through, Jatera's mind was racing, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. Her sister, lifeless, her body still in the house. That moment, it stuck in her like a splinter she couldn't pull out.
So I was clocking out of work. I had to clock out for 7 p.m. I had 2 missed calls from my younger sister. And then I ended up getting a call from my sister's phone, and her picture showed up on her phone. It was my niece. She was crying. She said, "Jatera, my daddy killed my mama." And I'm like, "What?" And I just was screaming. And so I just sped all the way to my sister's house. I was just trying to keep my niece calm because it was her and her 2 younger sisters present at the time where it happened. They were in the house. And I just made it there. Once I made it there, it was too late.
The kids were off in another room, their faces white with confusion. Jatera ran to them, wrapped them up in her arms while they cried, "Auntie, where's Mommy?" The 12-year-old asked. You could hear the fear in his voice. like he was clinging to the hope that someone would say this wasn't real. But there wasn't anything to say, nothing that could make sense of what happened. Families started showing up one by one, each of them trying to hold back their own pain, but it was everywhere. They hugged each other tight, tears falling, words catching in their throats. They shared stories about how Jameka could light up a room, how she was the best mom anyone could ask for. It was these little memories, the small pieces of her that they held onto, even though the grief felt too big to bear. But there was more than just sadness. They knew they had to protect Jameka's kids, to keep them safe from the world that had suddenly turned so dark. They started talking about what to do next, how to keep going, how to get justice for Jameka. A vigil was the first step, something to remember her by and something to show the world that what happened to her wasn't just another headline. Neighbors and friends came through too. They brought food, offered support, small things to help in a time where no one knew what to say, but it mattered. It showed that Jameka had meant something, that her life had touched so many others. It wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about standing together, finding strength in each other. Another thing was that after Jameka was killed, her family didn't sit still. They got louder, more determined. They knew her story needed to be told, that it wasn't just about her, but about all women living in fear. Jameka's sister, Tara, became a voice for the voiceless, talking about the warnings that were there, the threats that were real. And she told anyone who would listen, if someone tells you they're going to hurt you, believe them. Get out.
We're just hearing a lot of different rumors. I just feel like whoever knows where he is, if you see something, say something. You know, call the police, reach out to our family, just let us know something. And to whoever's hiding him, they should feel bad as well. They should feel like a coward as well, because that could have been anyone's sister, you know, mother, cousin, friend, and my family is just, we're lost.
Yeah, this guy been around our family for over 20 years, and like we did nothing but show him love. He couldn't even go stay at his own mama house. He couldn't go stay at his brother's house, his sister, nobody from his blood family, but we took him in for 20 plus years. He never brought nothing to the table, only took away. He probably still owes us money to this day, but it's not about the money, it's about the children and about what he did, and I just wish he could be man enough to just accept the consequences that he caused. Like, turn himself in, that'll be the best thing to do. But he never grew up. He's never been a grown man, so.
Do you guys know what may have triggered this?
I would say what triggered it is they were not together. She only let him come around so much because the children, they love their dad so much, so they always wanted him around. My sister felt sorry for him, so she would let him come spend nights and things like that.
They organized rallies, partnered with groups that fight against domestic violence, and made sure no one forgot Jameka. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It was everyone's. It was the call to action the community needed, the wake-up that had been a long time coming. Social media took off with it. Hashtags, posts, everything. People started sharing their own stories. It was like Jameka's death opened up something that had been locked away for too long. And through it all, her family kept pushing. They didn't just want justice for Jameka. They wanted to make sure no one else had to go through what they had. In all this, I know you must be wondering where Christopher Lee Levels was.
Welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. It's been almost a week since Jameka Williams' life was tragically cut short, and her family is hoping to find her killer. Police believe her boyfriend shot and killed the 38-year-old mother last Friday. According to her family, his name is Christopher Levels. Levels allegedly threatened her in the past, but he never followed through with violence, according to family members, until that day, when, according to them, he shot Williams in front of her children.
Christopher Lee Levels turned himself in to authorities on November 16, 2023, after nearly a week on the run following the fatal shooting of Jameka Williams. During this time on the run, the case had gained significant media attention and community outrage, putting immense pressure on him to face justice. When Levels finally decided to surrender, he did so at a Houston police station. His actions signaled a moment of realization, possibly driven by guilt, and the knowledge that law enforcement had been actively searching for him. After walking into the police station, he was taken into custody without incident and immediately charged with murder. His surrender marked a crucial step in the investigation and legal proceedings that followed the tragic event. Authorities were able to swiftly process his arrest, thanks in part to witness testimonies and surveillance evidence that had already identified him as the prime suspect. Witnesses mentioned that he expressed disbelief at what he had done right after the incident. This moment provided some measure of relief to Jameka's grieving family and a community shocked by the tragic domestic violence case. Many believed the court hearings would be hard. You see, it wasn't just about proving he pulled the trigger. It was about showing that this had been building for a long time. The jealousy, the control, the threats. Jameka had been afraid, and she had reason to be. Her children, her family, they all testified to that. The case wasn't just a legal battle. It was a chance to shine a light on what so many women go through in silence. In the end, Jameka's family turned their grief into something bigger. They didn't just want punishment for what happened. They wanted change. They wanted people to know that domestic violence isn't just something that happens to other people. It's real, and it's dangerous, and it's everywhere. In the weeks following Christopher Lee Levels' surrender on November 16, 2023, the court case against him began to take shape. Charged with the murder of Jameka Williams, the legal battle was closely followed by the community and media, as it involved a tragic case of domestic violence. During his initial court appearance, Levels faced formal charges of murder. The prosecution detailed the crime, highlighting how Jameka was shot in front of her children. The severity of the charges was evident as the judge set a high bail, reflecting the gravity of the situation and the community's demand for justice. As preparations for trial began, the prosecution worked on gathering critical evidence, including the testimonies of Jameka's children and other family members who spoke of Levels' past jealous behavior and threats. They aimed to show a pattern of domestic violence leading up to the fatal incident. On the other side, Levels' defense team began constructing a strategy that could potentially reduce his level of culpability. They explored whether his actions were a result of momentary rage rather than premeditated murder, hoping to lessen the charge from first-degree murder to a lesser one. During this period, there were discussions about a possible plea deal. The prosecution was determined to seek full justice for Jameka and her family, indicating their willingness to go to trial if needed. Levels' defense team had to carefully consider their options, as accepting a plea could mean a reduced sentence, but would also require an admission of guilt. The emotional toll on Jameka's family and the community was significant. As court dates approached, family members and domestic violence advocacy groups attended the hearings, showing support and pushing for justice. The case resonated with many, becoming not only a fight for justice for Jameka, but also a broader conversation about the dangers of domestic violence and the need for prevention and support. Each step in the proceedings further underscored the deep loss felt by the community and the urgency to address such issues within society. As the court case against Christopher Lee Levels moved forward, a trial date was set for early 2024. This moment marked a critical step in the quest for justice for Jameka Williams and her family. The community, deeply invested in the outcome, awaited the trial with a mix of anticipation and tension. The prosecution aimed to present a powerful case, focusing on witness testimonies particularly from Jameka's children who had been present during the tragic shooting. Their emotional accounts were expected to play a significant role in illustrating the impact of the crime. The prosecution also planned to present evidence of Levels' previous threats and jealous behavior, showing a history of domestic violence that ultimately led to the fatal incident. Their goal was to establish that this was not an isolated act, but the tragic result of a pattern of abusive behavior. On the other hand, Levels' defense team prepared a different strategy. They intended to argue that his actions were not premeditated but rather a result of momentary loss of control. By examining his mental state at the time of the incident, they hoped to introduce doubts about whether Levels had planned to kill Jameka. This argument aimed to reduce the charges, potentially from first-degree murder to a lesser offense. Additionally, the defense was likely to change the credibility of witness testimonies, suggesting that the trauma experienced by Jameka's children may have affected the recollections of what had happened. As the trial date neared, Jameka's family and the broader community continued to stand together, showing support through pre-trial hearings and events aimed at raising awareness of domestic violence. For the family, the upcoming trial was a painful but necessary step in their pursuit of justice. They knew that the legal process would reopen wounds, but they were determined to ensure that Jameka's story was heard and that her tragic death would spark important conversations about domestic violence and prevention. With the courtroom battle approaching, the outcome of the trial would not only decide Level's fate, but also bring a larger conversation about domestic violence to the forefront of the community's consciousness. Both sides prepared for an emotionally charged and impactful trial. After several days of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Christopher Lee Levels was found guilty of murder. The jury's decision reflected their belief that Levels had acted with malice and intent to kill, despite the defense's attempts to portray his actions as impulsive. Following the verdict, Levels was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The outcome was met with relief by Jameka's family and supporters, who had gathered throughout the trial to advocate for justice. They expressed gratitude for the legal system's acknowledgement of Jameka's tragic death and hoped that this case would raise awareness about domestic violence issues. As the trial of Christopher Lee Levels approaches, one question lingers heavily. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Jameka's family, her friends, and even her children had witnessed Levels' jealousy and threats long before the fatal night. Many knew of the growing tension and the danger she was in, yet it seemed no one acted in time to stop it. The prosecution will likely emphasize these patterns of abuse, but it begs the question: how many people saw the warning signs and remained silent? Could intervention from those who knew her have saved her life? At what point do we as a community become complicit in tragedies like this when we choose not to step in? Thank you so much once again for watching another video by Wednesday Crime. If you like the way we bring you stories or you learned something new today, please like this video and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet. As always, remember to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Perhaps someone learns from your experience or advice. I will talk to you again in another video. It's bye for now.